Okay, thanks for coming to the Xanadu Review. My name is Prester John Zervent, but you can call me PJ. Today I have Sudana Krasniqi, who I have described as, kind of the love child of Carrie Bradshaw and Hunter S. Thompson as far as her writing goes. Sudana, you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, like the type of writing you like to do? I think probably a good chunk of my audience already knows about you, but why don't you jump into it a little bit?
Sure. So let's see about me. This is also, side note, I hate answering this question. For somebody who writes a lot about herself, I hate being perceived. So let's get this one out of the way.
Anonymously.
Yeah, right. No, I'm just a New York City girl, elder millennial who's kind of just taken up writing just as a creative outlet. I haven't spent the majority of my young adult life writing. I think I've said before that I've always considered myself to be more of a reader than a writer, just an observer and an appreciator of art. So it's kind of really cool when Substack came along. I just literally stumbled upon it 9 months ago or so. Apparently it's been around for years, which is news to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I see how many people have been on it for years, and the viewership and followership they have, I'm astounded that I haven't heard about it earlier. And even now, I don't know if you find this, whenever I mention it in real life, people still look at me with a question mark. So
it feels like it's up and coming, though. I hear more and more people referencing it, and podcasts and other writing. So it feels kind of like the place to be right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we're here first. So we will till the end. And in terms of my writing style, I kind of feel like I'm just dabbling a little bit everywhere. There's mostly just confessional memoir in there, thrown in with a little bit of poetry, some short stories. I mean, I've always joked that most of my stuff is 80% true, 20% just artistic creativity or whatever I can't remember the vodka does. So yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, that's basically it. I'm just kind of going wherever the journey takes me. I'm just kind of a regular girl, and it's fun to just be here for the ride.
I think at least that's part of what I really like about your writing, the very confessional style. It's very kind of a window into your life. That's why I said the the Carrie Bradshaw thing, because you're it almost feels like New York as a character in your writing, because that's the backdrop.
It is. That's not a ploy or a HBO TV character trait or anything like that. It really is. When I say that I think New York City is probably the love of my life, I'm not exaggerating that. For better or worse, it's the longest, most important relationship I've had. I think that's always kind of been a constant, which is probably why I get really defensive over it sometimes. I mean, this can go into bigger discussion over toxic relationships and what they bring into our lives and why we cling on to them. But for better or worse, this is home, and it shaped my education, my family dynamic, my cultural upbringing, as mixed and diverse as it is. Even my personal relationships. I think I wrote one of the first things I wrote that probably a lot of people haven't read when I had 12 followers. Thank you guys for being around, by the way. Was about the first real relationship that I had, who moved down south, and he wanted me to move down with him. And ultimately I chose to stay in New York for a lot of reasons, but because to compete with New York City, you've got to be the Chrysler really something. Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, it's definitely a character in my life. For how much longer remains to be seen, probably always. So we'll see.
Yeah, no, it's something that I really enjoy, since we've kind of exchanged joking barbs about this, because if you were a worse writer, it would be off-putting, because it's something that it's almost cliche at this point, because I've made the joke before, whenever it's HBO's Girls, or The Marvelous Miss Maisel.
Please, okay. I hate.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, point being, though, it's almost oh, thank God somebody's finally writing about an artist trying to make it in New York. It's a story that's never been told.
That before. No.
Yeah, but it's a great backdrop. But I guess that's a good segue into one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and that's been kind of in the discourse recently, about whether or not culture is stuck, or with media, writing or movie, TVs, what have you. It feels kind of we're, and at least to me, in the last 10, 15 years, it's been the same thing on repeat. And it makes me think of another famous New Yorker who we both really love, Anthony Bourdain, who
Oh, Tony
I,
B.
I
Yeah.
Oh, I should have grabbed. I have a picture on the wall of like that Saint
Really?
Anthony. It's like the style of like the Catholic saint, like Saint
Of
Anthony the
course.
Opinionated. But what I always loved about his writing more than anything was because he, for you or anybody in the audience who doesn't know, right now I work in tech, but before I did that, I worked as a chef for a lot of years. And I
Yeah.
like that Anthony Bourdain lived life, and I feel like his writing had so much more vitality about it because he wasn't influenced by other writers. His writing was influenced by his life, and it feels like a lot of books, TV, movies, what have you. It's influenced by people who they write influenced by other books and media. Whereas Anthony Bourdain, a lot of my favorite writers, this is based on their life, and like the New York thing doesn't feel contrived because of it.
Yeah. I mean, to start with Anthony, I think it's super fascinating to learn. And I just recently learned this, as long as I've been a fan of his work, all types, that he only first started writing when he was 44. Like, let that sink in, right? When people nowadays, when we're in the age of Gen Z being so ahead of the game with like a lot of the writing pieces that they're working on and like churning out books and novels and all this stuff. And it's like, then you come to think that he worked as a chef for 28 years before he even like decided to put pen to paper. And I think if you would have asked him if he ever considered himself a serious writer, he probably still would have answered and laughed no. I watched a few of his he did some presentations at different universities in the last leg of his life, where he spoke about like creative writing and what his process was. And he was always kind of like humbled and shy if you watch back some of those videos when he spoke about it. Because I guess when you're something else for 28 years and you do like one really fantastic thing and then that becomes your identity overnight, it's probably pretty daunting. And I think he was always like really flattered and humbled when people went to him for like creative writing advice or spoke to him on a different level. Because I think one quote that stuck with me is like, people would always ask him like, what's the most disgusting thing that you ate? As if that was like the most definitive thing in his life, right? Some dude who like, I don't know, shucked oysters for his entire career. But yeah, he ostensibly used to laugh at people when they would ask, like, is it harder to be a writer than it is to be a chef? And he's like, absolutely the fuck not. Like, he would probably jokingly say that writer's block didn't really exist, that like it's not an ailment. You just sit down and if you can write that day, you can write that day. If not, you do something else. I believe when he wrote, what is it, Kitchen Confidential, he did it like 5 a.m., like before his shift. Like he would wake up, churn out, write for an hour or two, and then go and work in the kitchen for, I mean, what is it, 10, 12-hour days? You would know better than me. So
Pretty common, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's and I get where he's coming with that too, because I think it's funny. Like now that I have a quote unquote professional job, I don't work anywhere near as hard as I did when I was washing dishes or well, and also you have to be like you said, with being able to deal with disgust stuff, because it gets pretty gross if you're washing dishes and it's all decayed food, or I butcher like a whole big piece of beef or like whatever. It's like after that it's okay, I can sit down and write for a little bit. But it's interesting that you said is this the first time you really started writing? Because for me, we joined Substack around the same time, because I'd never really written before joining Substack at the very beginning of this year. I have a friend, Chesterton's Fence, who also writes on here. Shout out to him. He's kind of a friend and mentor, and he just kind of encouraged me to write. And it's not a huge audience, but I'm starting to get some people listening to me. And kind of like Anthony Bourdain, it blows my mind that people want to listen to me. So did you ever do anything like the older blogging era?
Only on MySpace.
Tumblr. MySpace.
I was not a Tumblr girly. I can't even like make that claim. I think I was already like wrapped up in just being a New Yorker and like trying to make it through college and like a part-time job and a full-time hot mess of a relationship to really like devote myself to Tumblr. But I did have a few like small things in MySpace, which I'm kind of mad that I can't access again, because like I think I wrote one thing where I didn't keep a written. I had written journals, and then they just disappeared through moving around as an undergrad. So it was digital, but yeah, after like MySpace and that kind of went away, I don't really remember sitting down to write unless it was like academically relevant. I know you wanted to talk about like my degree in history and whatnot, but or pursuit of, since I never finished it. But yeah, no, this is really the first time that I like actively sat down week to week to like write something, and that people have actually read like on purpose. To have more than like 2 people read my things is completely new to me. To have like 1,000 people read it is like wild beyond
It's insane, right? Yeah.
Crazy. I remember I went to a reading like a month and a half ago, and 2 people knew my name that I'd never met before from online.
Cool.
And it was pretty cool and a little bit weird, but so I guess I kind of get what Anthony Bourdain went through. He said that like he went through, you know, like just being an unknown rando chef like on the streets of New York to one day like walking down the block and people like yelling out Tony all the time, and that was kind of weird.
Tony. Yeah. No, that's really well. I do have to say it feels like you're definitely kind of hitting the zeitgeist for sure.
Yeah, I for
people
better
are interested in it.
I don't know.
No, it's really cool. So I guess that kind of makes me think a little bit more. Another thing that's been, you know, quote unquote the discourse recently is like the urban rural divide, and it sounds like because you've lived in New York pretty much your whole life,
pretty
right?
much all my life. Yeah.
Pretty young.
Left, it wasn't by choice, and I always came back. So
yeah, no, it's to me it feels like kind of a silly debate in some ways, because I think like the uninteresting radio answer is, you know, you'll like what you like.
Absolutely.
But I've always kind of lived in bigger cities. I grew up I think there were like a couple years where I lived in smaller towns, but I grew up in Canada. We moved here to the US and like
you grew up in Canada? I didn't even know that.
Well, I mean, I was born in the US, but we moved there when I was really young, and I grew up like Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is like, you know, a couple hours north of you technically, because it's like latitudinally, longitudinally, whichever one is like, you know, go straight down the middle, right? It's a pretty big city. I've grown up in like, you know, the industrial Midwest area, like Chicago, Milwaukee area. Now I live in Denver, but there's definitely something to that that's enjoyable about it, because it sounds like you can at least appreciate it, because you almost moved to the South. What was do you want to get into that a little bit? Or is that just
I mean, I did not almost move to the South. I had an opportunity to, but I think deep down I always knew that was not going to be it for me. Not to say that I would never move anywhere other than New York. I think going to LA kind of showed me that I could be happy in a different location and setting. North Carolina wouldn't be that place, which is where said person had decided to take up shop and move to, and wanted to do the whole like white picket fence, you know, family dream with me. And maybe it was just the place and time that I was in my life, or maybe it was just North Carolina didn't really have anything to offer me when compared to where I was currently. But yeah, I don't know that I could see myself in the Deep South. I think that if I were to move, I don't even know that I would want it to be to a different city, because what city could ultimately really compare with the one I've spent so much of my life in? I would probably want to go somewhere completely different. Like I kind of tinker with the idea of going back to somewhere in Europe. Somewhere coastal would be nice. I have my eye on Maine, hardcore. So yeah. I don't know. I think I'm nearing an end here. I can kind of feel it in my bones a little bit. Like, you know, when you kind of just get that inkling that like right before it's like you just come home one too many times, pretty exhausted. And I think I could do this in my 20s. I can do it in my early 30s, but like commuting 5 days a week and the constant stimulus is just.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And that's kind of the thing that makes me think that I would want to move back, because my family, it's funny how like the thing, I don't know about you, but at least for me, like some of the things that you hate as a kid can end up defining you, because my family moved around a whole lot when I was a kid. I think the longest I ever lived in one single place. When I was a kid, it was like, 3 or 4 years. But then we moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is where I grew up. It's kind of like Chicago, but without the
Yeah.
culture. It's a similar size, there's some culture, there's some cool stuff to do there. But at a certain point, it's like, because I live in Denver now. It's a decently sized city. There's really cool stuff to do.
Yeah.
But kind of the same way. Like, I moved around a lot. I did a lot of cool stuff. I traveled for work. And especially, like, I know what you mean, coming home, traveling for work, especially during the pandemic, which was a really weird thing I can get into a little bit later if you want. But now it's like, it's cost of living is just getting higher and higher. The traffic, it feels like, crime is getting worse and worse. There's a part of me that like understands the desire to get out. And when you say coming home, because I was listening to your podcast you did with Alexander Constantine the other day. You were talking about both of you going back to Eastern Europe.
Oh, right. That's kind of home.
Yeah. Well, because for me, like, I moved around a whole lot, but my family's from the South. And a couple years ago, my grandfather passed away, and I went back home. Well, home, not exactly, but to the South for his funeral. It's a very weird thing because that's the thing that made me think of. It's like, oh, this isn't where I grew up. Like, my home is probably more in urban areas, but there's something to, here's a culture here. I won't say specifically because I don't want to dox myself. My family has big, deep roots in the South. Like, I have family who was like in the Country Music Hall of Fame, who wrote like some pretty famous Southern.
Brooks?
It's damn it, yeah. My real name is
because that'd be really fucking cool. Because
it's not Garth Brooks.
Okay, well,
no,
damn it.
But I can tell you offline if you're really interested. But
George Strait.
Yeah, and like the some big like traditional Southern gospel songs that I had family members write, and being around all these people. It's like, this is
that explains your interest in music, which I know we're gonna probably get into really.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I come from a very musical family, but there is something to it. Like, as I get older, I don't really know, because the white picket fence thing doesn't really appeal to me. So I'm trying to find a good middle ground of like a mid-tier city, or like, because right now where I live, it's cool. It's a big city. There's a lot of good stuff to do. But if I want to, I can drive 30, 40 minutes and be out in the mountains.
See, and that's where I'm sure I think we definitely touched upon this in the last podcast, like visiting the West Coast. That's kind of where I see the appeal of living there, is like, for me to get into any kind of real nature from Brooklyn is quite a fucking, mission. And after you spend 5 days grinding it out in Midtown Manhattan, for you to spend your weekend like traveling, like so this past summer, it's no like secret that I'm a beach bum. So I made it a mission to spend every weekend at the beach. And I succeeded, but it was fucking exhausting. Like, getting from where I am to Long Island, to like the better beaches, and doing that. It's a mission, and being somewhere where you can just, like you said, 30, 40 minutes out is kind of a luxury that I think that we as New Yorkers don't really understand how important that can be, especially the older you get. Like, I can't really like relax in the setting. And to all credit of where I live in Brooklyn, which is in Bay Ridge, which is pretty south, it's a very quiet, almost suburban neighborhood. So it's got that going for it. But at the same time, it's really hard to kind of unwind, like, spiritually. You know what I mean? Like, I think that, like, I need to be on a mountain or on a beach, or just not literally fucking touch grass, like that, like touch grass to kind of connect with nature a little bit. So yeah, that's one of the things that like really just amazed me with being in California for 8 days. It's just like how beautiful the desert, the beach, the mountains, all of that is. And it's so accessible there too. Like, everything was within a short drive away.
Yeah. I mean, because I would imagine that would be like, if you're doing beach, you could do like, 2 or 3 hours there, and probably easily like 2 hours there, 2 hours back, something like that.
Exactly. But like, going to the beach from here, even if you were to drive to the Jersey Shore, which I love, it's just a 2-hour mission. And then, you got to take the fucking cooler, then you got to pack, you got to take the Tommy Bahama, you got to take, of course. It's just like a whole day event. And by the time you get home, traffic pending, it's like 9 p.m., which is bedtime for me. So Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm getting older because especially because I'm I guess mid-tier millennial. I'm early 30s because I used to be, especially on my chef days, I could like, go on four
Yeah.
hours of sleep and we would, drink and like,
And we
do
thrive.
drugs. Yeah,
And
it
we
was
would
great. But now
thrive
it's like,
too. I
damn,
got
I'll have
promoted that way. That's how I made it through like the corporate ladder.
yeah, but it's at this point, it's like, I just don't have the energy and it doesn't really appeal to me in the
Either.
same way that it used to be.
Yeah.
Go out in the bars. It was fun. And I think that's why, at least for me, it's nice to be able to do when you're young and you're up and coming, you have
Yeah.
that energy, to be in a bigger city. But as you get older, I do see
Yeah.
there's definitely a more of an appeal in trying to find some good middle ground.
Right. Which is why like it sounds like a cop out answer, but it's really depends on what is your place in life and what are you trying to get out of it when people have the like urban versus rural discourse. Like it depends. My sisters all moved out to Jersey. They have husbands and families now. And for them, it makes absolutely perfect sense. I wouldn't buy a house in Brooklyn. If I ever have the, lofty dream of owning a home, it will not be here. There's a backyard here, but I can literally see into everyone's home and they see into mine. It's
Mhm.
just, when I'm tired of living this like 1 bedroom lifestyle, which is again coming up pretty soon, I think it's going to be time to look elsewhere. But for now, and it's also like when people like me go on about like the lofty long essays about like living in New York and all the cool things that we have so much access to. I'll let you in on a little secret. We don't have the fucking time or energy to do any of that. Like I went to the Met last Saturday and I was fucking tired. Like I went to the museum for 3 hours and I was exhausted by the time I made it back home. So, and that
Yeah.
happens like 3 times a year. I've never gone to the Statue of Liberty. Probably never will.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's cliche, but you only do maybe sometimes when you have friends in town. Like
Right.
this point, like people talk about the mountains and a lot of cool stuff out here. I don't do it too often. Same thing. Like it's it's obviously not to the level of New York, but Denver's a pretty big city, has a lot. And also,
Denver's awesome. Yeah.
well, there also like we don't have the infrastructure to support the population that we have.
Yeah.
So especially over the last couple of years, it's gotten insane. It's like the traffic will be insane just to get out to the mountains.
Really?
So it can be. It depends on the day. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
not the infrastructure to support the population. But I guess
We
we
don't
can
have the parking to support our population. There
yeah.
don't drive here.
Oh
So
yeah. I mean, I would imagine like also it'd be insanely expensive to own a home in New York, pretty much anywhere.
yeah, and I don't know that it's honestly thinking of like square footage and like for me owning a home means having a front yard, a backyard, having a fucking office. Like I don't think that having a garage that
Mhm.
at least in Brooklyn, there's not very many homes that like these. I'm currently in a townhouse, and there's no garage. There's like a really tiny basement, so it's like, would I want to own it? Hope my landlord doesn't hear me. He lives next door. No, I
Yeah.
wouldn't want this home. So
So, and I know we can get into other stuff too, but I am curious because also I know like I've had a lot of friends who are from New York, and it seems to
mhm.
be like almost like one of your main pastimes to talk about like it used to be better. Like, but
Oh
would you
yeah,
say
90s
because
New York.
people
There was
is
nothing,
it
man. You had to be there.
is it exaggerated? Like, because that's on the news a lot that like New York is getting worse. I just heard like Eric Adams was arrested for corruption. Is the
Well,
downhilling of New York
indicted.
uh, indicted? Even
So
still,
if we
right?
want to be correct,
Is that exaggerated or has it actually gone downhill?
um, I mean, yes and no. Um, look, let's not like pretend that we're people are always like, oh my god, people are like taking a shit out of Midtown and midday. That was always New York. Let's start with that. Like that's always been kind of a New York vibe. I think what has happened, and this kind of really took effect. At least I noticed it in my personal day to day after the pandemic. So crime and like drug use and all that stuff that lowers like the livability of a certain area, it was kind of relegated to certain neighborhoods, say 5-10 years ago. Like, and you could say this in any city, right? You always kind of knew where like after 10 o'clock you probably didn't really want to be. What's happened in the past couple of short years that I've noticed is every neighborhood is a little bit like that now in New York. Like even mine, like people in the neighborhood here talk about, 10 years ago, you really wouldn't see any like random acts of violence or any like drug use on the streets in broad daylight. Whereas now it's like prevalent kind of everywhere. I recently had my niece visit. She spent the weekend here last Thanksgiving, and we did like all the New York City, like, holiday touristy thingies. And I was kind of on edge because there's a lot of, not that I thought anything was going to personally happen to us. Like, I've lived here all my life. I know how to handle myself. But because I didn't need her to see things as a 7-year-old. And so, yeah, I think the difference is there's these small acts of violence or things that you don't necessarily expect to see on your day-to-day in like your more better prolific neighborhoods. So it's like every neighborhood in New York kind of has a little bit of everything happening. So for me, that's been a little bit of a game changer. So you kind of expect to see craziness a little bit everywhere, whereas opposed to 10 years ago, it would be only in Hell's Kitchen or only in Midtown or only in the bad parts of Brooklyn or only in maybe the South Bronx, but it's kind of an open field now. So, and I think that has a lot to do with the economy shifting here after the pandemic, has a lot to do with just the mental health crisis. I think that's like really overlooked when people start talking about crime. It's like, it's not necessarily crime. It's just, these are just acts of people that are really in need of a lot of help that the institutions aren't giving them. So, yeah. And when it comes to Eric Adams, I mean, I don't know how we do it, but every year it seems like New Yorkers get together and we vote in a mayor worse than the one before. So we need to pat ourselves on the back. I don't even know how he got elected. I can't find one New Yorker who has anything positive to say about him. So that much we can all agree on is he's been pretty ineffective as a politician, and as a human being, I think we could have done a lot better. So
yeah. Well, it feels like just in general, people have kind of, and across the board, either checked out of politics, like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. I mean,
or,
as honestly as maybe they rightfully fucking should. Like I've checked out.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to be, other than, even the local stuff. It's like it can be fantastically corrupt. But I think you hit the nail on the head with the mental health crisis, because even here, like I remember, because also like growing up in Milwaukee, I had like, and obviously it's not like, to the same degree, but it's like, Chicago basically, where like I had friends who lived in the suburbs. Oh, don't go visit PJ in his neighborhood. You're gonna get shot. It's like, what? One time in my whole life, like somebody tried to rob me when I was taking a walk, but it was like these two 14-year-old kids. Like, no, dude, you're not gonna do anything besides just talking.
You know what's funny is that the one time I think somebody tried to like mug me too, and I was like 16, was like another 16-year-old, and I laughed and I was like, "Do you think I have money? I'm like fucking 16, and it's like 1990. Like, where do I have money? Like, I don't have fucking money." And then she like looked at me, and I was like, "Yeah, girl, go rob him. I don't fucking know what to do."
Well, I think that's why people, especially who maybe do, because I think it's a grass is always greener situation. Because if you're like, you grow up in like the suburbs or a small town, you want to go to where it's the big city. And I hear people who I know like out here, or other people in urban areas, like, oh, I want to move out to the country where it's safe and stuff. There's good stuff going on, but also like I have family who live in like rural Michigan, and it can be pretty rough out there too. There's a lot of crime.
I would be more terrified in fucking rural Michigan than here. I need these people around me. I feel a little bit safer with 40 people on top of me than not. So
yeah. No, there's definitely good stuff to it, because you do get look, there are different types of community, but I think
absolutely,
everybody wants more and more a community, because especially since the pandemic, it feels like people just feel more and more isolated, and just everybody has their guard up more than they did before. Because at least like our downtown area here, like there was homeless, like, any bigger city is going to have that. But
that's the thing that I say. It's like, it's always been an issue. Like, when have we not had homelessness in New York City? Like, let's be real.
Yeah, there's not been like, it feels like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, as well as economically, we've just not really recovered from that still.
Right. Yeah, same. And I honestly think that's what's kind of propelled all this like rhetoric that people are like, the things that you hear about. I think the underlying bigger issue is like the mental health crisis has really gotten completely just overlooked, and it's in dire needs here. from addiction to the economy and like loss of housing, Jesus fucking Christ, I wouldn't even want to get into that, that there is none.
Insane.
Yeah, it's insane. So all of this just becomes a perfect storm, and then you have more people than ever that are in their 20s and 30s in every neighborhood who were just kind of scraping by and relying more on like drug and alcohol abuse and just kind of making do on the streets. And it's just, yeah, so I think you just see more of that more often. And I think one of the things, look, I'm not an economist, but don't they say that like once petty theft becomes really high in any landscape, that's a good indicator that the economy has kind of turned to shit. So
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I think that's just common sense too. I don't think
yeah,
you need to be an economist.
right. It's just when like that's the kind of crime that is kind of like uptick. It's just like small, everyday like crime has just gotten greater. But I think you could say that about anywhere in America and anywhere globally. Like we're talking about the United States, but anytime I hear anything about the fucking EU, they're Christ. That's what's going on in the UK and everywhere else is not much greater. So
Yeah, but I guess to kind of loop back to one of the original questions I had for you, kind of makes me think of people talk about, like, New York in the 70s. It was a lot rougher, but also like some of the best.
New York, yeah.
Yes, well, also like there's so much great art that came out of that,
Yeah.
and so much great writing, and it makes me wonder, like, again, because it feels like culturally with the writing and everything, it's just kind of gotten to a point where everybody's repeating themselves.
Right.
It makes me wonder if we're going to see like another great renaissance in art and writing because of it. It's maybe kind of fucked up to say, but maybe a silver lining that we're going to see that's going to come out of this.
I mean, I hope there's a fucking silver lining, right? So I was just talking to my boyfriend earlier about this, and thinking about your question about Anthony Bourdain and like starting to write later on in life versus, getting a degree in your 20s and then like, going to some writer's workshop and then taking it from there. For me as a writer, I don't know what I would have written about 15, 20 years ago, and if it would have been of any value. I'm kind of happier looking back now. And I
Once
think
you've lived a little.
Yeah, I've lived a little, lived a lot, hopefully have a lot more living left to do. So there's that. But currently, and I don't think it's a secret that I'm not really a big fan of modern literature. I kind of see a lot of like, what's the proper phrase? Like writer's workshop mentality going into it, if that makes any sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the writing style. Like I see a lot of great writing. I don't necessarily know that I see a lot of great storytelling.
Like technically very good, but
exactly. Like I'm sure people can outright me fucking left and right. I didn't finish college. I even when I was there, I wasn't even looking into like writing courses or anything of that nature. I never took a writing workshop. I hardly go back and reread for grammar mistakes. I do it on the train ride.
It's a part of your style, I think, too, if it's a little bit of an imperfection, like not you, me, anybody, because to build on that a little bit, it makes you think of, Anthony Bourdain, or, I'm kind of new to, I guess, literary fiction. I'm starting to get into it. But somebody like Hemingway, like these people lived lives they weren't, because it feels very like, again, technically good, like, yet it's very, how do I want to put it? Because I love literature and art, and I think that's what makes the human experience worth living. But the idea to me, like, and again, I didn't even go to college, but the idea that you could go to college to be an artist, like, oh, well, I've gotten good grades, now I'm a good artist. Like it's kind of like if we're going to talk about music a little bit, somebody who like is really good and can shred on the guitar,
like music,
well, you can't write a song to save your life. Like you're technically very good, but there's no depth beneath it.
There's no it almost seems like it's lacking soul, to be honest with you. Like I look at the New York Times like bestseller list week to week, like any New Yorker. I have the app on my phone, so I go through devotions every day and check on it. And if I have to sit through The Body Keeps a Score being number one on that list one more week, I may Bourdain myself, like, as a writer. It's like, do we have anything, like, why? I get self-help is important, but why, for how many, has no one written anything better? Like, has no one been moved So again, when I say that, like, I think the writing is probably technically better. We have so much access to education, technology, more platforms, more viewership, more feedback, all of that stuff, which is fine and well. But has that taken away from us actually like trying to find a story to tell? Like, all of these books that are being written now, which, you know, are great and being turned into movies, like the Colleen Hoovers of the world, all fine and well in the literary world, but like 25 years from now, will anybody really remember those characters?
Probably
Like,
not. Yeah. Well,
right.
that's something I've noticed in um the literary world, even in like the genre world, the things that get um a lot of praise and on, quote
What,
unquote, the
mysteries and like
best.
romance novels and then self-help, right? I mean, those are
Yeah,
like,
well, it's does this stuff sell well? And I guess that's kind of again something that makes me more optimistic. Like Substack is blowing up, like that, blogging, independent stuff, just because these institutions, I feel like they've kind of I don't know, kind of shot themselves in the foot by being such a club, like having a certain aesthetic or a certain political leaning, and you're not real. It's because years ago I dated this girl who was she went to art school in New York as well, and her art was not really that interesting. But I remember having this conversation with her about we're it's good we wanting to move away from the quote unquote dead white men. But then
yeah,
to me, when I was talking about it, it's like, oh, we're gonna lift up these voices, that voices, which on paper is good to me, but like be it the written word or visual art, like you're not really moving the dial, at least to me. You're just, oh, here's a different hierarchy. We're not going to be
right,
non-hierarchical. We're not
right.
just going to like put out art and see how people react to it. Because to me, good art is immediate. Like if you need a college degree to understand why a painting is good or why a book is good, it's probably not
Or
that
why a
good.
song makes you fucking cry 20 years later. Like, yeah,
Yeah, no, it's that there's something immediate to it.
right.
But I guess that's another good segue to, because you said you read mostly older stuff and you were a reader first. So I guess two-part question is like, what are some of the stuff that really inspired you, and what really interested me? You said you went to school for history. You
I did.
um,
I
didn't
thought I was
graduate.
going, I thought I was going to be Fisto. That was my
Yeah,
first.
but what is what are some of the, like, I would say some of the stuff that really inspired you as far as writing goes, or like what about history made you, because
Yeah.
that's my thing. I would really like to write more about it. Like, we love Fisto or some of the other like a guy James Sarsgaard who writes on here, does some cool stuff about
You know
history.
what? God bless you guys for it. You do it. I don't even have the like the attention span for that much research. So
Mhm.
I'm glad that
Yeah.
somebody else is carrying that torch.
Well, I try to do it as like a framing device for, like, because I wrote about that before. Like, what was that piece I did? Like a rebellion in the heart of the empire, where I wrote
Yeah.
about like the fall of the Aztec Empire, and kind of looping back to what you're talking about, like the Aztecs. That's for the people who didn't read that at home. Like the Aztecs were not like, obviously it was horrible that the conquistadors came in and like
Mhm.
fucked everything up and took over. But I think that happened because the Aztecs were like a pretty brutal empire who like made things terrible for all the other people there, and everybody ganged up on the Aztecs with the conquistadors.
Yeah.
But sorry, that was I kind of rambled there for a second. But yeah, my question: what about history or writing? What really inspired you and made you want to write?
I mean, when it comes to writing, what inspired me to actually like, pick up my own pen and paper was probably music first. Um, uh, Finding other female artists that were lyrically doing things that just kind of blew me away. And this is just your classic 90s alt rock artists like the Fiona Apples, the Courtney Loves of the world. I listened to them and I was just kind of like taken aback by, because up until that point, rock had been kind of dominated by, outside from like Blondie and whatnot, they were kind of male dominated. And then to hear women that were close to my age, just slightly older, doing and writing things that were like really impactful for me to hear and kind of represented my own experience growing up. That definitely pushed me to become more of an experimental writer. But yeah, I absolutely read first. And this is just a product of the New York City school system. My introduction was to just classic literature. So we went down the list of all the Jane Austens, the Thomas Hardys, the James Joyces, the Dickinsons, all that stuff, Nabokov, which this day still holds up for me. I often joke that I revisit Wuthering Heights like every winter. It's just because I'm also a dramatic kind of girl, so this is what I tend to gravitate to, which is also why I think that modern Lit could be a little bit more dramatic. Like, give me some gothy, um, Victorian ghosts, and I'm probably in. But yeah, writing wise, it was definitely music that finally like kind of pushed me to experiment a little bit. But when it comes to history, in high school and then furthermore in as an undergrad, I think some of the best teachers by far were my history teachers and professors. And I mean in a sense that they were just able to stand there in front of 30 some odd children in New York City and then had them all captivated with these stories of the Revolutionary War or the Roman Empire. They were just really amazing storytellers, which to me is important when I read anything or listen to it orally. Um, so the fact that they made 14, 15-year-olds in the Bronx give a shit about the Revolutionary War or the Roman Empire as much as they did, just really, really moved me. And it's just interesting as fuck. Like, how do you not want to listen to these amazing tales of just the human spirit? That's really what it comes down to me. It's just like learning about humans and mankind and how we have evolved or not evolved and how we persevere. So that's what really just drew me there. It's just a genuine curiosity. Like, I'm a curious person. I think I'm a scholar through and through. Like, if I had the means, I would still be in some classroom taking as many classes as I can afford right now. So yeah, that was definitely it. It's just
Yeah.
utterly fascinating to me. Like, I could learn about any empire, any group of people that are not my own day in, day out. Yeah.
Well, because I think you hit the nail on the head. There's something about it. Like, it's funny. So many people I talk to, they'll say, like, their favorite teacher was your history teacher.
Yeah.
Unless, like, because if you can, you guys have to be really kind of shitty at your job to make some of these stories boring. Because that's always what drew me to it. Because originally, like, my family, I grew up very religious. My dad was a pastor. And even when I was very young, first it was like Greek mythology. And then, like, when I was very young, it's like, oh, wait. The Egyptian, okay, I was very, very young for this. Oh, they were real, or the Babylonians were real, or you read about like the Roman Empire, or like because like that specifically, it's a very well documented.
Right.
And I was reading Seneca and like here talking about or some of these Stoics that they're talking about the same experiences that we have now.
Yeah.
Like there's just something that's very, very human about it. Like it doesn't matter. Because to me, that's also one of the best ways to get outside of your own culture, outside of your own head, because people are people. Like you're going to react differently if you're raised in a different culture, but people are people. There's constants to the human experience, how we deal with the world around us, our emotions. And that's always what drew me to it.
Yeah, literally. It's just, to me, it's like history is learning the human experience time and time out. Like, you just change the year and the setting and the characters, but overall the main themes kind of just seem to stay the same, and that's super fascinating to me. I think one of the first books like an adult ever gave me was The People's History of the United States, Howard Zinn.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was 16, and my Mr. Jerry Black of Lehman High School gave me that book, and it kind of changed my life a little bit to read history through that kind of lens. That wasn't like a McGraw-Hill textbook. It just shook me up, and it was, I don't know. I mean, like you said, it's just incredibly fascinating to me, and just, listening to mankind's story time and time out. As a child who probably, and I guess with my own upbringing, I was kind of somebody who was like looking for her own conflicted and very mixed identity as an Eastern European immigrant child being raised in 90s New York City. So, you're not European enough, and then you'll never really be completely American. So I kind of guess I dug into learning about everyone else's history to make sense of my own. So
yeah. So would you say, because you're I've talked to a lot of different people that from an immigrant background has said a similar experience.
yeah,
And I can relate to it just a little bit because my family, like we came here from Canada is basically the same, right? But moving around to different parts of the country, you're always a little bit of an outsider. And I think that made me kind of a little bit more an observer in a lot of ways, because I've moved around so much. Like when I lived in Canada, it was like a mostly immigrant neighborhood, because I think I forget. I mean, I feel so bad. Like but around that time, there was a big like refugee crisis that went over, and I had all these people
In
from the
Canada?
Middle East. Yeah, well, a lot of them ended up moving over to Canada after. Well, they moved, from I forget where it was to Canada. So when I first moved to the U.S., it was like 2001, which is a wild time to move there.
Yeah,
That was right
yeah.
after 9/11, and people were like, oh, Muslims, they're terrorists.
Height of all of
I
that.
grew up around these people.
Yeah, yeah,
They're pretty. They're just like anybody else is the thing, because I
yeah,
feel like especially people who are very cloistered, no matter what your ethnic background is, like it's easy to otherize the other person.
yeah.
But at the end of, or like either say, oh, they're bad, or you can fetishize it and say, oh, they're all so good, they're all so nice. But like, people are people at the end of the
People are
day,
people.
be it a different country in today's world, or 2000 years ago in China. Like, people are people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, I don't know what it is about history teachers that do it best. I think honestly, intrinsically, you have to be a really good storyteller. Like, you have to be up there and command an audience and kind of like weave these stories in a way that's interesting to people. So this is probably the common denominator, versus say, like, everyone probably expects me to say like my English lit professor was the one that shaped. I mean, it might be easy to think that, but yeah, it was definitely history that really moved me first, like these stories of humanity that kind of like made me cry. Like, I remember having to learn Latin in middle school because I was raised in Little Italy, in the Bronx, and so it was a very, to this day, very Roman Catholic area, obviously. And they made all of us study Latin for 3 years, and at the time I went with it, but I just never really understood the importance of it. And it's definitely shaped my love of languages and like other cultures, and the appreciation for it. So yeah, I mean, in a
Mhm.
lot of ways, that's the kind of things that you get by being raised here. Is just like you study Latin for 3 fucking years in a public school system for no good reason other than the Catholic Church runs it. So yeah.
Yeah, it makes me wish that I had tried harder to learn another language, because I,
Yeah.
I grew up in Canada, so like French was the second. It's like Spanish is over here,
Can you speak
and
French?
un petit peu. Like, I went to like a school, like my high school was like one of their big things was like learning a language, but
Yeah.
so allegedly everybody was supposed to learn a second
I
language.
mean,
I
high
was
school
kind of
languages are,
yeah, well, also I was kind of like kind of a little shit, kind of because I didn't even go to like my senior year. Like, I border on technically being like a high school dropout, since I didn't even go to high school my senior year for the most part. I would get into trouble like tagging and stuff like that. But I think I just had like, I don't know if it was that my teachers like took pity on me, because I can't speak French. I was supposed to have like a language project, do like
really.
write all this stuff and do a presentation in French. Like, yeah, I can't speak French, but it was either just, it was, my teachers took pity on me and passed me anyway, or it was like, an overcrowded, underfunded inner city school and they just didn't care. But
Yeah, one less person, so get out of here.
yeah, pretty much. But it was kind of the same thing, where it's like kind of a rough area, kind of not. Like,
Yeah,
me and my friends, we would joke, like, we don't live, it's not bad enough that we live in the hood, we live in the hat. Because it was like,
right.
we would hear the cops and stuff, and there would be, shootings and stuff. But it was like, yeah, it's rare-ish. But also, like, if you live in those areas, like, if you don't get your, unless you're really unlucky and you don't involve yourself in it, you can
Right.
stay out of it
Honestly,
easily.
my cousins and I talk about it all the time. Now, like when we get together and hang out, it's like we never had any idea that we were really in any kind of danger. We were just a bunch of kids walking the streets of New York. Like, our parents would give us $20 and we'd just get lost for the day. And what that meant was just going to get Chinese food and making a Blockbuster run. And we really didn't feel like we were in any sense of imminent danger, because you only know what you know, right? So
Mhm.
I kind of that's kind of an area of contention now with me, is like my nieces are all being raised in Jersey, and I kind of feel like they're being a little bit too sheltered. Like, I would have been able to navigate like the subway system when I was like 12, or I could have walked myself to school. And I think some of the drawback of being raised in like a very suburban area is you kind of don't have that inner confidence built in a little bit, like that.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah,
have to
So
deal with things on your own. Because I want to, it's kind of cliche to say, but I think we're like one of the last generations who
yeah,
are,
that went to go
just
buy
figured
cigarettes
out.
for their dad. Yeah, we're definitely one of the last
Yeah.
generations that did
And you
that.
have to be able to, because at least like for me, like, because I was, like I'm pretty like outgoing now. Like I'm, kind of reserved as a person, but I'll just throw myself into anything. Because before, because I always loved to cook, but I just like, oh, let me try to get a job at this restaurant, and
How did
I
you end up as
start,
a chef, by the way? That's
well, the long story short is like, well, when we moved out here, to Denver, I before that, like I kind of did, I guess more blue collar stuff. I was working like factories or, clean office parks or, warehouses, stuff like that. But I'd always loved to cook. And when I moved out here, I had the opportunity, like there was just, a restaurant nearby and I needed somebody to like work the front desk. And then one night they're like, oh, well, somebody who did the grill called out. It's like, well, I know how to cook. They threw me on there and I started doing prep. And then I started, getting into more restaurants. I'll just throw myself into that. Like the same thing. Now I work in tech. Like I didn't go to college for it. I just first started, I got a job at Geek Squad because they were hiring. I was able to like work my way up and just kind of figure it out. Or the same thing with writing. I may not be good, grammar wise, but I feel like I have an experience or a
right.
point of view that at
I mean, you
least
have a
willing
voice,
to
right?
listen
You
to.
have a voice that people want to listen to. And like, I feel like the grammar and everything else, you can kind of, if you want to get better at it, you can take a class for that. But like, if you don't have a genuine voice that's interesting and has a story worth listening to, then it
Who
doesn't matter
cares,
how
right?
many MFA programs you've graduated from or whatnot. So
Yeah. Well, again, to talk about the music angle, because to me, I think about it like punk rock. I used to be in bands too. Like I had
yeah,
a friend who I played with a couple years ago. It was interesting to see the contrast because, like, he played piano. It's like, all right, let me learn all the chords and the ones and the fives and all this stuff and all the music theory. Where when I first started, I was like, I had somebody show me like the basic cowboy chords. Like, I'm good. Let's go. Let's
of
start
course.
rocking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What was the first song you learned how to play? I'll tell you yours if you. I'll tell you mine
All
if
right.
you tell
Oh,
me.
geez. I think because I even like weirdly enough, I didn't learn a lot of songs. I just wanted to start writing my own stuff
Really?
instantly.
That's bold. Yeah.
Well, also because I think I didn't have like I was maybe like too ADHD or something. I had to like learn discipline, but I think it was probably like Bob Dylan's "Knocking on Heaven's Door" because I started out playing bass. I was like,
That's
this is
ambitious.
okay. I wanted because I kind of the same music you love, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. Like I wanted like the big distorted guitar. And I didn't understand music at first. Like, oh, you can do the big distorted sound for bass, but like they mostly just want you to like be undistorted. And I was like, well, look. Then I was like, well, girls would probably like it more if I played acoustic guitar because like Jason Mraz and all that stuff was
Yes,
big at
John
the
Mayer,
time.
bring it home.
Yeah, John
The
Mayer, all
king of
that.
acoustic guitar.
Yeah. But no, that was kind of my thing. Probably like knocking on heaven's door. Like I was really enamored with like the 60s, 70s stuff, and then like Marilyn Manson were like my two sides.
Yeah, oh yeah. The
Hmm.
Doors and then Marilyn Manson.
Hmm.
Um, I think I only ever took up guitar because I needed to be cool. So guitar
Hmm.
it was. But actually, senior year of high school, I was pulled into my guidance counselor's office and he was like, Sue, so you never got a music credit. And I was like, didn't I? They were like, no, and you kind of need one to graduate. So by this point, all of my, like, this was, senior year. So I only had like 3 AP classes, everything else was done. And those class slots for AP, whatever, are pretty fixed since there aren't too many of them. So it was like a 7 a.m. to whatever AP English and AP Psych, then AP History. And the only music credit class that I could get was advanced guitar, which was last period. And I happened to know the teacher who was like 23. He had just graduated from like SUNY New Paltz or something, but he kind of ran like the underground like show scene here in New York.
That's cool.
Yeah. And his name was Dave Rose. And I went up to Dave and he was like eyebrow pierced, like blonde spiky hair, Dave Rose, like teaching us guitar. And I was like, hey, look, I need to sign up and like get a music credit. And I'm like, can I pop into your class? And he was like, absolutely. I'm like, but it's advanced guitar, isn't it? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, I've never picked one up. And he's like, well, that's fine. I'm like, are you going to hold me accountable to like playing? I'm like, you understand that there's no way I'm going to be advanced walking in here. And he's like, well, you'll have to play advanced by the time you we had like a showcase at the end of the year, and he was like, "You'll have to be advanced." So that's how I learned how to play Iron Maiden's Trooper. Like first 2 weeks in, but he was actually really great. Like I remember he would help after school. We even learned to play, was it Winger that sang Only 17?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
Winger.
that, thinking back, that probably wasn't appropriate.
That's funny though. But
Yeah,
you
it
know, it's
was
kind of
kind of
punk
funny.
rock in its way. It's like, you know, you're not doing just power chords. Like, all right, sink or swim, bitch. You got to learn how to
Yeah,
play the trooper.
literally, he
Go.
looked at me stone faced. He was super nice and sweet about it, and I was like trying to, like, I guess, like, you know, blink my eyes out of like having to learn how to play fucking Tools 46 and 2 for like the final like presentation. And he was like, no, he's like, you can join in, but like you need to pick up that guitar. He's like, I'll put in
a
the
hard
work
one to
you
play
do.
for sure.
Yeah, and we did it. I graduated, I passed, and he actually ended up taking me to my first concert. We went to go see Cake.
Oh.
So yeah, we went to see Cake at some I think Prospect Park in Brooklyn. They played a festival, but that's how I got involved with instruments and music.
Well, that's
Not
super
by choice.
cool.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, I mean, again, that to me, those are always like my best moments. It makes me, at least to me, like I just, if I, you know, because there, you know, I've kind of joked around, like to the degree which astrology is real, right? Who knows? It's fun, but like I've heard,
I mean,
it's
if we
very
asked
Libra.
Alex last week, he's made it sound pretty fucking crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, it's like the very Libra thing of like, you know, I will. I'm not indecisive, but I do want to like think out my decisions. But
Yeah.
once I made them, that's it. That's what I'm doing. So I'll just throw
Right.
myself into it.
And I'm a
It makes
Virgo,
me,
so I'm a perfectionist. So you best believe, like, once they told me that I needed to like learn fucking advanced guitar, I was in there like 4 days a week, like busting my fucking ass and like earning my calluses.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, it made me think of like when I was a little kid, like I was terrified of swimming, and I grew up, you know, this is in Canada. It was right by the ocean. Like my mom made me take swimming lessons, but
Really?
I'd just seen like, well, that was the year Titanic came out, and
Oh
it was a
God.
mind fuck because it was like, you know, the first time I'd seen a naked woman in the movie, and then also like the last 45 minutes just people dying and drowning. So I was terrified of swimming.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, then, but that summer, or like 1 or 2 later, I went to summer camp. I didn't know how to swim. And I was like, well, all the other kids are swimming. I guess I'm just going to jump into the deep end of the lake. If I swim, awesome. If I die, I die. And, you know, to this, you know, it was fun to do.
Yeah. It's, I learned similarly too. So one of my uncles would grab us by our feet at the deep end and like kind of dangle us and like and like we like threaten to throw us in there, and he did, and like that's kind of how you
Literally sink or swim.
literal like shock therapy, like throw us into the deep end. And again, probably not the most not or probably not the least traumatic way I could have learned to swim, but well, here she is. She can swim today.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you sure learned though. But I
yeah.
guess that we touched on music, and I know you want to get into that a little bit
Oh
because
yeah.
what also with the
There.
way that culture is repeating itself, I think
Yeah.
we've talked about this a little bit privately. Like it's so wild to me that I see like young teenagers like dressing how we did in like
With
2003,
15-year-olds wearing the Slipknot
listening to the
t-shirt. Like,
Deftones and stuff, and it's in some ways it's kind of a little bit strange, but also kind of cool that like I know new metal's making a revival. Were you a new metal fan, or was that you? I think you're a little bit older than me. That was like because to me new metal was the big thing when I
well, that
first
was very
started
early
listening to music.
2000s, no? Like
Mhm.
Korn, Limp Bizkit,
Yeah, it's weird.
Park.
It's having such a revival. I remember seeing that like this summer there was a festival where Deftones and System of a Down were headlining, which I think are new metal bands. Some of it was a little goofy.
Absolutely new metal
I think a lot
band.
of it holds
Yeah,
up. But you know, kids today love it.
yeah. It's all over. I mean, I've never had a TikTok, but like, case in point, my 9-year-old niece this summer I was wearing a Nirvana t-shirt. She
Mhm.
asked me how I knew of that band. I said, what do you know about Nirvana? She's like, I was listening to it. She was coming home from she was overseas this summer. She was like, I was listening to them on the airport on Turkish Airlines. I was like, you were listening to Nirvana on TikTok? So I guess one, I think social media has a lot to do with the prevalence, and probably Nirvana, I guess, with the what was that last Rob Patterson Batman movie? They used which Nirvana song that kind of made them blow up again.
Something in the Way, I think.
Something in the Way, yep.
Mhm.
So they had a big comeback there. So when it comes to new metal specifically, and I was a total new metal fan, I mean, I think I'll always be more geared towards like just grunge, like at my heart of hearts. I can be gothy, I can be new metal-y, but like where I kind of reside is like somewhere between like Eddie Vedder and like Scott Weiland Lane. That's like me right there. But yeah, I think what it always stood for was like what just teenage angst and aggression and feeling misrepresented and underappreciated. So those are all things that like new metal did really, really well, that rock music tends to do really well in general. And I think that Gen Z probably gravitates towards that right now, since I think they're probably just feeling a lot of the same things, if not more.
The isolation.
Yeah,
it was kind of forced upon them, because it used to be, if you're a social outcast for whatever reason, you would maybe gravitate towards that stuff. But now, like, especially like I talk to some of these Gen Z or younger kids who, like, I feel so bad for them that they grew up during the pandemic where like isolation was forced upon them. So maybe there's like an emotional honesty to it that, because be it new metal or, just like that era in general, like it was kind of shat upon for a long time, but it seems that it's making a resurgence just because it's so emotionally honest. Like there's something to, some of it's maybe a little bit corny and melodramatic, but the fact that you're just going
so we're
for
teenagers.
It,
I mean, when
being,
you're we're all being melodramatic, like
you're not being ironic or anything about it. It's like, this is, it's maybe a little bit corny, but no pun intended. But Korn was very honest, and they weren't like my band of the era. I was more like System of a Down. Was like my first huge band that I got.
Oh, really we played the shit out of that that album.
Oh yeah. Or I guess we'll do that quick detour. That's the question you had for me. I thought about it. Like your ideal band lineup. I ended up going like roughly 90s is kind of what I'm going for. So here's my my ideal concert. It opens with Garbage.
Ooh.
A big Garbage fan. I love Shirley Manson. After
Shirley
that,
Manson. Have you listened to her stuff before Garbage?
No, I would like to. I'll check that out. And after that, we have Typo Negative, Peter Steele, beloved.
I honestly wish that I was a little bit older, that I would have been around for Brooklyn during like Peter Steele's reign. So
well, it's so funny. I'll do the rest of my list, but I saw somebody said like Peter Steele is how every male metalhead thinks that they look, because he is like, what is he, like 6'5"? He's 6'5", like long black hair. But Typo Negative I love. A little bit of a curveball after this. I'm going with the Cardigans. Most people know them for Love Fool, which honestly I love. They're great. I have a couple of them on vinyl, but especially I can picture the album. It's like a sunset, but it had My Favorite Game and all that. They get a little dark and goth, but they still have that like Swedish pop sensibility under it. After that, I have Radiohead. That was like my other big band that I really loved in high school. And closing with the Smashing Pumpkins. I know you talked about it with Alexander and Fista the other day. I'm the Smashing Pumpkins defender, especially like Melancholy Era. I think Adore is really underrated and has some great songs.
So too. If I had a gun to my head, I would take Adore with me.
Yeah, I first goes for me Siamese Dream, because I love that dreamy, grungy sound.
Yeah.
But, maybe I would say Melancholy Era, just because I've seen some live videos and they do some kind of like weird arrangements of their classic songs that I don't really care for quite as much. But that's my 5. Have you given it thought? What's your ideal lineup?
I have. I mean, my 5 changed literally. I thought about it like every day since we brought it up for the past 2 weeks, and it's kind of changed a little bit, just because I'm such a fan of music and art in general that I don't like to. It's really where my vibe takes me. So I think I would have The Weeknd open up at my dream concert.
Okay.
I've had the pleasure of seeing him here at Barclays Center, and I think he's just such a really good, unique pop star with a lot of like R&B and like rock influence. Like if you've listened to his first album or two, he has a lot of like Deftones and even the Depeche Mode influence in there, which is interesting. That I mean, I've heard him speak about both bands as kind of.
You'll have to send me some songs then, because I just kind of know like some some of the top 40 stuff, like I'm not like, I hate top
That not
40s.
even the
It's
top 40
background
stuff
noise to
is
me.
like whatever to me. It's like I think like his early work is like really what was kind of like groundbreaking for me anyway, especially like Sudana in her 20s. So yeah, I would definitely have The Weeknd open up, and then that would segue into who would I have after The Weeknd? I think I would go with Depeche Mode, because I think that vibe would kind of like lean into the other. I'm a huge Depeche Mode fan. Like they're definitely in my top 5, which is kind of I've been roasted as being a little bit like a Gen X there, since they're a teeny bit before my time.
Exennial, what do they call it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I just love like 80s synth pop, that kind of like dark vibe. After Depeche Mode, I think we'd probably have to throw in a little bit of Nine Inch Nails. I mean,
Sir Trent.
Sir Trent, Academy
Mhm.
Award winning Trent Reznor. Let's do him justice.
Get it right. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. That Social Network score did not write itself, guys. So
so good.
I know, right? The last one he did, I think I talked about, Challenger score, was amazing too. It was him and Atticus Finch, and they blew that out of the water. But yeah, definitely Trent Reznor, who was a huge, I can't believe I didn't mention him, huge writing influence for me. Like I think that a lot of what early Nine Inch Nails has done is just so like poetic, really. Like the music is almost like a symphony, especially like live. What he does like really interesting things live, which is just kind of really great to see. And it's part of the reason people always ask like if they're going to like get back and like release new music, and he's always said only if he feels like he can contribute something new and good to it. Like I respect that about him, that he doesn't want to make another album for the sake of making another album. I think when artists like say that out loud and like kind of mean it, whether it be a writer or any other medium, it's kind of good to point that like you can't really get caught up in just like churning out content, if you want to use today's lingo, and just like let the inspiration kind of take you somewhere, or maybe it doesn't. But yeah, so Nine Inch Nails, and I wanted to end with them with like a cool like stadium metal band, and I have to say Metallica.
Metallica, huh? Okay.
They are. I mean, I've always been a Metallica fan, but I remember seeing Metallica at Giant Stadium, which I guess is MetLife Stadium now. I forget. When I was in my late teens, was it the Summer Sanitarium tour? And Limp Bizkit did open for them. And being in a space with 20,000 other Metallica fans all singing along to Creeping Death is like an experience that'll probably like stay with me for, forever. It's just incredibly like energetic, and just electric, honestly. Like I think once upon a time we spoke about like live acts and like people that like kind of pay homage and tribute to the stuff that like made them really big, because there's a bunch of artists that like kind of refuse to like sing the Enter Sandman of their catalog.
Like Radiohead famously wouldn't play Creep for years. Like,
yeah,
I'm sorry
exactly.
that the song that you wrote that made you famous millionaires that you get to travel. I'm sorry it's an inconvenience for you to play that when I get to see you once in my life.
Yeah. And what I respect is that James Hetfield and all they are not those people. Like they go out there and they fucking play the shit out of that stuff. Like, and they tour really frequently. I believe the last tour they played MetLife here, and they did something really cool. They played a Saturday and Sunday, and each night the set list was completely different. So whatever night you went, you got a totally new experience. And I really respect that, because they're like just that's super fucking professional, right? And respectful of your fan base to kind of go out there and like bust your fucking ass. Like, I think there's a time and space for you to be creative and experimental and give them the piano version of fucking Ride the Lightning. But when you're playing a sold out arena, probably not then.
Yeah, at least, I mean, to mention the Smashing Pumpkins again, like Billy Corgan is famously a little bit prickly, shall we say?
I mean, he's always been,
yeah. But that's kind of, again, it makes part of what I like about him. But I remember reading about, I don't want to play the hits. I'm like, yeah, I want to hear the deep cuts, play the stuff off of Oceana. But like, if I don't hear 1979 and Mayonnaise, I'm going to be really disappointed.
Just give me like 3 hits, and then like, I'll like humor you for the rest. So
yeah, and I want to hear like, I love the deep cut stuff too. But like, if you're a band of that scale, like, do like 50-50 of like some, because if you're a
Exactly.
band that big, play the songs people know, weave it in with the other
Um,
stuff.
I think I mentioned it, like we probably talked about this months ago, but I saw Third Eye Blind play at some small venue here in New York like 4 or 5 years ago. And they went up, and it was, lively New York City small crowd, and they played like all like B classics and like deep cuts and like acoustic things. And a few people in the front were like, drunk and rowdy, and they were like, play Jumper, what the fuck. And the dude just went on Stephen Dorr, what's his name? Stephen, I forget.
I'm not a Third Eye Blind guy. I don't know.
Me either. I mean, they're fine. But after this, I was definitely not a Third Eye Blind girl. But he got so irate that people were asking him to play the hits, and he was like,
The
I'm
things that
not.
people love from you.
Right. And he was like, I don't know what you came here for, but I'm not playing anything from that album. And people were like, fuck you. And then he got so angry, he walked off. And like, you can't, it just was like, dude, you're the guy from Third Eye Blind, play fucking Jumper. Like,
I was gonna say it's Third Eye Blind, and like, whoa, that's a couple years ago. It's like 2019. You're acting like you're Axl Rose in 1991.
right. Like literally,
Axl couldn't even get away with that because they really fell off.
I'm proud that us as New Yorkers called him on his shit. Like, you know what? You don't need to play our city anymore. Go take that shit somewhere else.
Right.
When you're ready to play Jumper, come back.
Yeah, you're an entertainer first, because I don't know if you're maybe teasing me a little about this. Like, one of the best shows I've ever seen was Weezer, because they know how to play a crowd. And I was like, I wasn't like the hugest Weezer fan. They were on a festival bill. I was like, wow, I know all these songs. We're all singing along. It's fun. It was a great show.
You have to make it an experience, like, especially with and I'm not even saying this to like joke around, but like with the way ticket prices are now.
Oh, it's insane.
You gotta give me something. Like, I gotta go home with some memory of like the shit that I like cried to when I was 17. So
yeah, I saw Smashing Pumpkins was coming to my city, and I was like, to get even a semi decent ticket was like $200. Like, you better fucking play 1979, man. You can do a weird acoustic version if you want, but you better fucking play 1979 or Mayonnaise or some of those songs. But
I saw one of the last most recent live acts I saw was A Perfect Circle and Primus. They toured together for Maynard's 60th birthday. I think is it 60 or 65, I forget how old. But that dude went out there in his 60s and fucking like put on a fucking show. Like, Maynard James Keenan is probably in better shape now than I am today, like half his age.
Yeah. So well, he's Tool is weirdly enough, like, I love basically everything Maynard James Keenan does except Tool. Like, I never really Tool. It's okay. Like, I don't hate it. I'll listen. It's not like my favorite, but I would take A Perfect Circle or Pucifer over for what. Maybe, I mean, I don't want to get too off into a tangent, but Tool is one of those bands that like Rush or something. When people love them, they really fucking love them.
There's a bunch of videos right now. If you like went on your YouTube, it's like if you ask a Tool fan anything, and then it's like 17 minutes later, we make you listen to all of Parable into Parabola and like start doing geometry together.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. But I know we're getting close to the end of what we're talking about doing, so it kind of leads into two more questions, a couple more questions to end on. But it made me think about, like, I'm hearing about all these younger Gen Z artists, and specifically because I remember, cause I don't know if you still play guitar, but I remember reading that, like, it was a year or two ago, like, Fender, the guitar company, released something like
my first
the majority, like, more girls bought guitars now than boys were. And it's interesting to see, like, the Taylor Swift effect. Like, some people, like, I'm ambivalent on Taylor Swift. She has a couple good songs. It's not necessarily my cup of tea, but I love that she's inspiring people, specifically girls, to play guitar.
Well, I mean, and I can relate to that. Like, earlier, I said that my bigger writing inspirations were female artists. So that's great that they have Taylor Swift, and I think Olivia Rodrigo and whoever the new, like, up and coming Gen Z artists are now. That's a fascinating statistic. But it kind of goes into, I mean, I think, and I might be wrong here. I'm obviously not a 20-something-year-old male, and I never have been, so I can't speak. But, like, I know that trap music and just like digitalizing things has been kind of bigger with males. I may
Mhm.
be wrong in making that statement. I don't know. I know that a lot of male artists, like younger male artists, are like experimenting with that kind of sound.
Well, it's
Which
almost like it seems like the new punk rock in the sense that like it's even lower barrier to entry for better for worse. Like you don't even need to make your own beats. You can just it's
no,
very very
you
easy
don't
to
need
do
it. You
or
don't even
just
need a
buy it.
guitar. You don't got to buy a
Yeah.
shitty used
You don't have to get
Fender.
together with
No.
a bunch of other guys and like do that. You can just put it out on
And I
SoundCloud.
think that's probably why, to finish answering that, like, why is Gen Z listening to, 90s and early 2000s music instead of making maybe some of their own, and to like the decline of like rock music in general as a popular like
Hmm.
lead in the mainstream. It takes money to form a rock band, right? Like a
Hmm.
successful one.
They're not cheap.
Yeah, they're not cheap. There's really, unless you're huge or an industry plant, there's really next to no significant money in touring. Um, and it's think of you today if you had to start a band with like four other people, like how much work you'd have to put into that.
Hmm.
And I don't think it's just economically or strategically feasible for a lot of 20 somethings. We can get into the whys and the hows of that. I think it's just, when it comes down to it, it's just easier. It's just a lot fucking easier to pick up your
Hmm.
MacBook and like work out some beats there.
Well, even
Um,
if you're doing rock adjacent stuff, like
yeah.
I'm starting to get back into recording again. It's just so much easier to do it all myself, and get a program to do the drums, and then I can just put it out there.
Right. And now what do we have? There's like auto tune. There's like all these other different apps that
Hmm.
you can use to kind of get any sound that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Technology you already own. So
And I'm not even on paper an auto tune hater because I think there are artists who have done cool things
same,
to me. Because
same.
to me, it's like saying, oh, there's definitely people who are very lazy. Take, like the Black Eyed Peas, who are, I think are, probably one of the worst musical art acts of like the last 20 years. At least
The black.
I hear that, I hear they used to be a lot
You're not
better,
a
but
Fergie
like,
Ferg fan?
I'm not a Fergie
I'm
Ferg
not.
fan.
Not really.
I'm not I don't want anything frigalicious. But
Oh,
in any case, right, because they're very uncreative, but say like, Daft Punk or Kanye
yeah,
West or even
yeah.
like what's his face? Who's the guy? T-Pain is like a great
Same.
singer. He just uses, or like even, Cher is a singer, but she has like a certain style. She had, what was that?
Mm-hmm.
Love After Life. That was a effect. To me, it's like saying, oh, Led Zeppelin weren't a real band because they used distortion and effects on the guitar.
Yeah,
Like it's an artistic choice. You can do it in a lazy way or a creative way. But I guess
exactly.
my question I was going to ask you, this is something you said you also wanted to talk about. It makes me think about you talking about, your Courtney Loves or
Mm.
Shirley Manson's. There was like an undeniable
Alanis
femininity to it.
Morissette.
Yeah, who are, it was because I think of like that era, like they were very up in front about their femininity and their experiences as a woman, but they're also like pretty punk rock about it. And
Right.
we were talking privately about like there's this particular brand of feminism that I'm even seeing on Substack now, where it's like really playing up being very helpless, very like, you're always a victim. And you said you wanted to talk about it. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I don't think of somebody like
Like what?
Courtney Love as she's kind of plays it up a little bit, but she's also very like fuck you punk rock about it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Look, my thing with like the battle of the sexes and like who's having a harder time with what and like who's the bigger victim. I mean, look, male, female, and everything in between. I think life has its hardships, right? And they're all unique to our experience. Did I have a shit ton of hardships growing up as an immigrant child in the 90s in New York City? Yeah, even more so as a woman, probably an eldest daughter. But those are things that I don't think any of them were anything that I wouldn't be able to like overcome, and that haven't shaped my character, what I would say, for the better. And I get kind of, and this is the New Yorker and the Eastern European in me, I get kind of pissed off. And I don't want to portray myself as a victim, just because I know that even in those instances that I have fucked up, or that I have like brought on like certain circumstances that should have been avoided or may not have been the best for me to be in, I was always smart enough to know better, and I know that I chose not to do better. And I think there's a certain power in like recognizing that. I think what we privately spoke about was the RFK Jr. and journalist situation.
Hmm.
That one, in particular, kind of like really just that type of like female victimhood, like really annoys me, because as a 31-year-old woman, I don't think we can, like, at what point do we try and stop playing the like um fragile girl card? You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
when do we try and take accountability and like use that as a motivator to behave better and like stand for something other than just our own personal gain? Because we can say that for those listeners who are not into the situation or haven't read too much on that particular one, and I may be wrong because I didn't really follow the story too deeply. Um, she's a journalist who I think met him once, RK Jr., and did one story on him, and then after that proceeded to like send him nudes of some nature, and that was allegedly the extent of that interaction. But what was the discourse that like that he might have used his power to kind of like lure her into that situation? But like, which may or may not be true. Like, this, both things can be true, right? Like, there can be an abuse of power in the situation, and she can just be a shitty 31-year-old journalist who wanted to send nudes and use her femininity to, you know, to gain more access to a political candidate. So like, I think that we need to start recognizing that both things can exist in society and do. And like I said, that's a really empowering thing. Like, I don't behave like the person that I write about that I was 20 something years ago. And I think it's a good question as to at what point do we stop like using that like, but I'm just a girl card?
Yeah.
Because to me it's insulting. I'm not just a fucking girl. Like which one do you want to be? Like, do we want to be empowered women to have all the same rights and accesses to in life as men, or do we want to like kind of say that we can't handle them once we get them? So
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I think, because I tried to be open-minded and hear where people are coming from. Yeah, there's definitely some terrible experiences that happen to
absolutely.
women, but at the same, it feels like kind of infantilizing in a way when I see some of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I feel it'd be very bad for your mental health. I think I forgot to send it to you, but I saw this meme that I saved to send to you that I for to talk about this conversation. It was a meme. It was like this little cute little lamb who was in like a bear trap that hadn't snapped yet.
Mm,
How it feels to be a girl. It's like
yeah.
that. On one level, I get where it's coming from, but at the same time, I wonder how much of it is just
But
these weird
how fucking
online
sad is it to live
spaces.
your life feeling that you're about to be clawed into a bear trap? Like, I don't want to live
Yeah,
my life that way. Like, that's a terrible place to exist, and
yeah.
I
Well,
choose
it's I
not
think
to.
that it's
Yeah.
like these online space, because, and again, to go back to, everybody is so in their own heads and in
Yeah.
these like digital ghettos for your own demographic. Kind of the same thing where I see like these incel guys where it's like, oh, to be a man, you're only, loved for, what you
Yeah.
can produce. And there's something to it. And I think it's, when I was talking, my first podcast I did with Lerpa Strike, she said
Mhm.
something that really struck, being like, this is the type of stuff that like, when it's just the girls you should talk about, or it's just the boys,
Right.
it maybe shouldn't be like something you form a community around. Because I
Yeah.
think, and
Just
again,
because you can doesn't mean you should, type of
and it's
thing. Yeah.
very unhealthy. And I see like, yeah, I with some of these guys, like, yeah, I get where you're coming from, and I definitely felt that, especially being a very young man. Like, I'm only okay looking, like I'm pretty average, but I was able to like, learn how to do stuff. I played
Right.
guitar and got good at cooking and stuff. I'm like, yeah, to a certain degree, some of that stuff is true, but really, at the end of the day, it's what you can actually make happen for yourself.
Right.
And these things are real, but like when you're just stewing in this
Well,
negativity,
it's a
very
self-fulfilling prophecy,
disempowering.
right? It's like, if you're going to live your life saying that all you're going to be is just a bank to a woman or a means to an end, that's kind of probably the type of women that you'll
Mhm.
attract. Same thing goes for women who kind of like play the young girl caught but not caught in a bear trap
Mhm.
syndrome. You'll like you'll always kind of attract the vibes that you're putting out there into the universe, right? Like, it's kind of like going into your significant other's phone with an intent to find something that's going to piss you off,
Yeah.
right? So if I go into the world looking at men and trying to like victimize myself or get pissed off or sexualize, I'm sure in this city, I don't have to go very far to find that. But if I kind of just choose to put my AirPods in and smile and be a pleasant person, I think that kind of negates those types of interactions, like completely, like for the most part for me. Like
Yeah,
I don't.
there's always going to be one-off bad experiences.
Absolutely. And I just choose not to focus on that. Like people sometimes think that I'm kind of like a male apologist. I just happen to be blessed with having some shitty males, which I openly write about in my life, but more often than not, I've been shaped and supported by like a big group of like really influential, great and supportive men in my life. And I'm not going to sit there and kind of like talk shit about them because it would be the easier thing to do.
Because you can find an audience for that online.
Absolutely.
And it's something I've noticed. I don't know if like what we'd call like girl blogging seems to be like the female equivalent of that, like, you know, incel kind of echo chamber. And it's
like
interesting.
The short guy Reddit version is girl
yeah.
blogging.
Well, it's also interesting that I hear you talk about, oh, in my real life, this is how I existed. You know, this is how I'm in, I'm in this city. Because I see these online echo chambers, and I feel like that's where so much of this comes from. Because like, in my
is in real life experience though. Like I get called names online for all types of shit. Like I block.
Yeah, ultimately, exactly.
Just block.
Well, people
same thing in life. Cross the street.
I think some people, well, at least in the online world, I think some people just like enjoy that, because I remember seeing that on Substack. Like there's because I've seen, and I think I posted about this too, there's this interaction that I see over, and because believe it or not, like other than Substack, like, and when I got on this year, I'm not a very online person.
I don't have any social media, so I believe you.
Same. I don't have any other social media. My real life, it's like a mixed gender friend group in my real life. Like all the women in my life who have been, some of whom have been very shitty. I even, had some abusive women in my life.
Right.
But, the vast majority of real women I meet are just trying to live their life. But I see these, like the online interaction I see that's been, people talking about, like a woman will say, oh, all men are trash, blah, blah, blah. You get all these guys who will dogpile on her, and it reinforces that, and it reinforces that for them. And I remember the funniest one to me is I stopped interacting with that type of thing. It wasn't even it was like, a woman arguing with another woman about, I forget exactly what it was. I think it was like something to do with like transgender identity. And she's like, oh, the Substack should ban this person. Like, why don't you just block them? And she blocked me. And then I remember seeing even in the comments, she was continuing to argue with the same person.
The other person.
Well, I think because people just want to argue, and they want to feel like they're a victim, and it just reinforces that. And it's, to me, it's, again, like you said, it's cliche to say, but you've got to just touch grass. Like,
you especially if you live life, man, talk to real people.
Well, like, be it gender or race, like I've always been around other people, like people who are different from me, even like going from Canada to the US, being around immigrant groups, being around people of different races than me. 9 times out of you'll have some people, it could even be somebody who has the exact same identity markers as
people in my own family.
Yeah, like, they can be shitty, but 9 times out of 10, like, people just don't care about you that much is the reality. It's not about you.
There's speaking of girls, and we mentioned earlier, there's a funny meme that like the girl bloggers use. So what was the name of the cool character? Like the cool girl?
Oh, from Gone Girl?
From is she? Well, anyway, so she was asked on like Instagram, like, what do I do when I'm like feeling really down about myself and whatever. She's like, I think you think too much about yourself. Like, you need to stop. Like, you're kind of like, you're
I see what you're
fucking
saying.
Important. Like,
I was talking about
really, I forget her name, the character's name, because again, I wasn't really
from Girls.
Yes,
Lena Dunham, or what's not Lena Dunham,
but there was one that was the cool hot one, long flowing blonde hair. But anyway, she made a really good point, and people kind of bring it up all the time. She was just like, I think you're thinking about yourself too much. Like, and people don't think about you as much either. Like, you just all need to stop thinking about yourselves too fucking much.
Good to self-reflect sometimes, but it's what I've said about, like, that or therapy culture, it's kind of, to me, it's like if like your check engine light is on and you don't go to the mechanic, then you're probably, you it's kind of dumb. You have something that needs to get fixed, be it, go go to therapy, do some self-reflection, do
Right.
tarot, whatever your deal is. But if you're doing it all the time, much like if you're taking your car in for every little thing and then you're listening to the mechanic, like you're probably just going to get fleeced.
Absolutely. There was one ad that I saw months ago on the streets of New York, and it said everybody needs therapy. And I forget which like online therapy thing it was. Was it like BetterHelp or
A little
whatnot?
help or something like that.
I
Yeah.
was just so triggered that day by the phrasing "everybody needs therapy." Everybody,
Yeah.
maybe
It's like
everybody just needs to
secular
talk to their
church,
fucking
really.
friend. Like,
Right.
talk to your
Well, people don't
fucking friend.
have friends a lot of the time is the
Right.
problem. Because I think,
And
like I said
that's the bigger
before,
issue
the
is like
secular
therapists.
version.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. We'll say
I was
the
saying,
secular version of go to church is go to therapy. And
yeah,
church, I
literally.
know my dad being a pastor, like a pastor or, a religious leader in general, like a big part of this being a therapist, but also like you have a community, it's your church, even, it could be, going to your local, band scene,
You know who was
whatever.
my therapist? Quote unquote, like I know people laugh at me like gym is therapy. It's really fucking not. But like my coach, like we spent like 10 hours a week together. We talked about everything but lifting weights sometimes. Like it's like, and that goes back to community and trying to find it wherever you can, whether that be online or at your gym or at your church or I don't know, at forming a band. Like I think we need to get back to those just in real life, like kind of
spaces.
Relationships. Yeah, like build fucking relationships. And if you want that to be your therapist and that's the person you feel comfortable talking to, that's all fine and well. But I get kind of irritated and rightfully angry when you try and tell me that everybody needs to be in therapy. I actually have about 4 or 5 really great people that can probably do the job a little bit better. And again, I say I've never really been in therapy, so I probably could have benefited from it. Who's to tell now? But I think that I only would have ended up like Tony Soprano 6 years in, the same fucking ass 6 years prior. So
yeah, I mean, I've done it a little bit, but my attitude is again like you go for something specific and then you deal with that, and then
right,
like because
if I have
I
an
only went
anxiety
to
attack in the kitchen, I'll go to a therapist.
yeah, I've had one therapist. I went for like 6 to 8 months, and what I liked, and the reason I kept going to him. Well, I stopped going eventually because he suggested law of attraction to me. I was like, a little too woo for me. But
Yeah.
no,
Were you writing
beginning,
like manifestations on
no, I
your
stopped going after that. But when I first came, he was like, I want to get you to the point where you're not coming anymore. I was like, oh,
right.
that's good.
And that same thing with like dating apps, right? Shouldn't the point be for you never to use a dating app like after that? Like
Yeah.
it's like the wellness industrial complex system, which I think really exists, and people need to
be
take a look
that or self-help or reading something.
Yeah.
Correlation. In the US, there used to be a lot easier for therapy to be covered by insurance, but they changed the rules, and that's when self-help really blew up.
Yeah.
So, and it has its uses.
Absolutely.
The only self-book that can't talk. The only self-help book I've ever read that helped me, I've only read the one and it helped me, was a book called The Power of Habit, which I can't think of the author right now, but it wasn't like, some of it's very, I don't want to say melodramatic, but it was for me like framing, thinking about your habits, thinking about your actions and stuff like that, I think is helpful. But kind of be it that or for some
because that's
people,
actually quantitative behavior that you can measure and affect is like habit changing. That's what when you're in the wellness industry, one of the things that you can control is your day-to-day habits. And that whole saying like 28 days, I mean, it stems from it takes 28 days to like break a habit and then another 28 to like create a new one. So like it's really important when
I think they mentioned that.
Yeah.
Well, it's a two-part thing for me, because I mean you have to have some sort of I don't want to say gospel, however you want to put it. There's something quantitative there, but also have the community. And I think like a lot of people, to loop back to that, even outside of gender discourse, whatever, you have to have a community that reinforces that, and that's what really will be it. Again, to loop back to the very beginning, it doesn't matter if your community and your tribe is in New York City or rural Alabama. If that's what you have, I think that's what more and more people are waking up to, like that.
And the thing about like changing, when you're on a path to like better yourself, that can oftentimes be incredibly isolating, especially when you do it say in your 20s or 30s, where you're kind of breaking away from your youth friend group and trying to, and those tend to be associated with all of our shitty immature behaviors. I know for me, when I got I'm not going to say I'm sober, because I do like my Pacifico and Modelo on deck. But I guess I'm what they call California sober, which is I don't partake in any hard drugs, and I haven't in God knows over a decade now. But when I first started that, I pretty much had to get rid of my entire friend group. Like, it was like a year or two of a lot of isolating times. And when you're on a path, whatever that may look like for you, it often does take a lot of alone self-reflection. And then I think through that is when you find a community that kind of realigns with your habits and the new goals that you have set for yourself, which I was lucky enough to find, in a few different places. And for me, like, NA and AA wasn't one of them. I famously gave it one day, and I kind of knew off the bat it was not for me. That was a little bit too much community in a different way. So,
kind of wallowing in it seems a lot of the and again, be it that or online things. Like, to me, like it's good to have that time of self-reflection, but you can't stay in that space. And I think online communities
live there. That cannot be a day-to-day existence for you, which is my bigger issue with like 13-step programs like AA or NA, is the everyday showing up and repeating, I am an addict. Like, I think that's mentally kind of taking you 2 steps back to move 1 step forward. Is like, if you kind of think of yourself as an incel or as a girl victim or as an addict every single day, you're, again, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, at what point do you get up in that meeting and say, I'm not an addict today? Like, this is 12 years later, I am not an addict anymore. So
yeah, I think that's a really good attitude, and to find a healthy, like, positive community, because that's something I've struggled with addiction a little bit myself as well. And like, one of the main things they say is like, you have to have something to replace it with. Because I've talked to people
again,
who
back to habit. It's all habit behavior. Like,
former heroin addicts, like, even like that. It's like, what I really missed was not the heroin; it's the community around it, the ritual that I had something to base my life around.
The ritual.
It's nowhere even near that level of addictive power. But I had a friend who was a big stoner, and he gave it up. And the same thing is like, I miss there was like a community around it. There's a ritual. We roll the joint, pass it around. And I think that's what a lot of people, because it's very easy to have these, what do you call them? Moments of clarity, come to Jesus moments, whatever. This is what I need to change. And now I found this online world, but it's not a real substitution for it. What do they call it? Like a Potemkin village or something. But but anyway, I know we're getting to the end of our time. I don't want to keep you too much longer, so I'll ask you. I'm kind of making this my ending question for everybody.
What's my drink of choice?
Well, let's real quick. What is your drink of choice? I'm an old-fashioned man myself.
Probably a vodka tonic. I like it light and easy.
Vodka tonic. That's a good choice. A little lime, or you just vodka and tonic?
A little lime doesn't hurt.
Okay.
Although I'm kind of a germaphobe, so I'm always like, where's that lime been? I'm that person.
No, that makes sense. My real actual question is, we talked about a lot of different stuff today. A good chunk of it was kind of negative, but what, if anything?
I'm sorry. Negative names.
No, I mean, it's been the case, for pretty much everybody. We're living in fucked up times. Yeah. But what, if anything, makes you feel hope for the future? Or if you don't have anything, like, what would you like to see that would make you hopeful?
I do have a few small things. I'm going to be honest. A lot of it doesn't make me feel too hopeful for the future. But what does is I've kind of seen, as small as it is, like a resurgence to like the youth kind of like wanting to just log offline. I've seen a lot of people day to day. We hear about it on Substack, and I even see it amongst the younger kids that I work with or come into contact with in our community or just in the streets of New York. A lot more of them are choosing to like log offline, and they're kind of reverting to just like using group chats to kind of stay in touch with their friends and like not use like Twitter or Instagram and like the DM space to kind of keep in contact. So finding more like real communities and like steering clear off of that like online bullshit and this like fake facade that like everyone is living in 24/7. That kind of makes me feel like they're headed in the right direction is there's that small bit of self-awareness that we're too much into the matrix here. Like we got to kind of like take it a step back. So there's that. And even just in talking about art, there's so many young artists, even in just Substack, that blow me the fuck away all the time. I mean, we could spend another 30 minutes talking about that. Some of them we both share and read, and some of their pieces and their insights are so touching, so well done, so creative, that it just kind of makes me feel like the kids are all right.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that they are listening to the same music that we listened to 20 years ago, which is like, they're just the fucking same as we were. Like they're just living in a little bit more challenging of a time or with different challenges. But I think, like we said before, people are just people. And, I think they've got a really difficult road up ahead for them. Like, so do we as millennials. But I think the kids that are about 10, 15 years younger than us have an even more challenging one. And I think it's kind of on us to be supportive there versus just shit on them all the time, because shitting on them is the easier thing to do. So yeah, I think as elders we kind of just have to like put down the gatekeeping a little bit and just let them into our communities too, because I think they're yearning for it. I think they're kind of seeing that whole Instagram filter is kind of dropping, and then they're yearning for something that's actually more real. So
well, that's great. Well, on that note, I'll go ahead and end it. Thanks, Sudana. Thank you so much for coming on. Anybody who's not already, go ahead and subscribe to her.